As we said in our last video, Tesla's electric car sales rely heavily on the government's construction of charging stations, especially low-end cars. Moreover, Tesla also faces competition from other countries, especially China. The competition will cause the growth of Tesla's electric vehicles to be sluggish in the future. China's overcapacity of electric vehicles has led to a decline in the price of electric vehicles and a gross profit. We also put forward our view that Tesla will use FSD to kickstart its sales growth. As predicted, Elon Musk went to China to get the permission to implement FSD. So, will FSD boost Tesla's sales performance? Let's first take a look at the FSD driving clips on the internet. These are videos uploaded by users after receiving the upgrade of FSD. As you can see from this video clip, FSD can now accurately determine when to turn left. FSD can now determine whether the front is the entrance or exit of the parking lot, and then stop driving so as not to block other people's access. FSD can accurately identify pedestrians and then give way to them. It is not a problem for FSD to cope with narrow roads, even more fearless when passing traffic on a narrow road. Pedestrians jaywalking on the road can be identified even in poor lighting conditions at night. The color of this pedestrian is similar to that of the light pole, and the car happened to be passing by. It is difficult for ordinary people to see it, and FSD also saw it. It is very difficult to see people running in the distance here. FSD saw it too. I believe that after watching these videos, you should feel that FSD is more like human now. I feel that it is smart enough to handle driving without human intervene. After all, there's no problem at all in giving way to pedestrians, making unprotected left turns, and driving on complex road conditions. And they are all long video. If you have any questions, you can look at the YouTuber X user I posted in the upper left corner to find their videos. You can also find them in the video description. We will explain FSD's mechanism in a way that even 3-year-old children could understand. Suppose you are asked to design an autonomous driving algorithm. I guess you will design like this if you have no experience of machine learning. For example, in the picture provided to identify this car, one may define that a car has 4 wheels, a license plate, and window. If a car would match all those just as it is a car, if one wants to know what direction the car is heading to, he or she might use the car's position in the 2 pictures to judge it. Then if a car in front has a puncture, and you have to redefine this as a car, well, the turn signal changes position and you have to redefine it again. This approach is called rules algorithm. That's not Tesla's approach. Tesla's approach is mainly divided into the following steps. The first step is to identify what the 2-dimensional object is. For example, this is a 2-dimensional cat. The second step is to convert the 2-dimensional recognition result into a 3-dimensional display. Then, the 2-dimensional cat becomes a 3-dimensional one. The third step is to plan the route the cat will take, and then the cat has to decide how to get out of the maze. These steps may seem simple, but they are actually very difficult to implement. For example, the first step to identify a 2-dimensional object without deep learning is to constantly define the shape or color of the object and then write rules to it. For example, if a cat is black or yellow, then if you encounter a gray one, you will be dumbfounded. After using the neural network, the algorithm will learn all the characteristics of the object, just like people. If you see a colorful cat-like object that looks like a cat, you can roughly judge it based on the characteristics, but you are not 100% sure that this is a cat. You can only say that there is a high probability that this is a cat. The algorithm of the neural network functions then same as human, and think in probability. For example, for the blurry picture below, I guess you probably judged that this is a cat, right? The biggest problem with neural network is that it requires a lot of data, otherwise it will be inaccurate. The second step is to convert the 2-dimensional picture into a 3-dimensional world, which is called 3-dimensional reconstruction. Although 3-dimensional reconstruction has been studied for a long time, it is not a simple matter. If LiDAR is used, 3-dimensional point cloud data is generally output directly. Tesla uses the occupancy network to detect the status of points in 3-dimensional space on 3-dimensional reconstruction. This is based on ideas from the robotic field, which divides the world into grid units, also called voxels, and then determines which unit is free or occupied. When performing object detection, once an object that has not been labeled appears, if it is a traditional algorithm, the identified object may be lost. However, after the emergence of this algorithm, it only needs to determine whether the space occupied by the object is free or occupied. If there is a group of dense spaces occupied by unknown objects, it can be considered as an obstacle and needs to be avoided. In addition, the concept of flow is also introduced here. Simply put, each unit has a relative speed relative to the self-driving car. Therefore, the relative speed of the object composed of units can also be calculated, so that it could determine whether objects on the road are moving forward, moving backward, or relatively stationary to the car. Overall, through occupancy networks, Tesla's use of relatively cheap cameras has achieved similar results to the LiDAR. But which one is better or worse? At least for now, we dare not say. It is said that one iteration training of Tesla occupancy networks costs 100,000 GPU hours, that is, 1,000 NVIDIA 8100 hours of training are used. This is the training cost of one iteration. The number of FSD training iterations in 3 months is more than 300. If this is true, small players really can't afford it. What's even more powerful about Tesla is that its own HW 4.0 has self-developed chips, and Dojo has also self-developed chips. Even though the computing power is greatly increased, its cost for computing is cheaper, and the players are even less likely to compete with Tesla. After learning these things, the algorithm will get a 3-dimensional model of the real world. Look, is it very realistic? But the problem is knowing this does not mean that the model will be able to planning routes. Otherwise, most companies that have purchased LiDAR would have already surpassed Tesla, because they died and almost skipped this step. The last step is hard. As for the last step, the initial approach is to use some planning algorithms, such as the well-known Astor algorithm in the computer field. However, these algorithms is far from perfect. Some planning problems have no solutions, and some problems have many solutions. And some of the solutions are so complicated that it would be better to just handwrite a rule. For example, if a car encounters a pedestrian crossing the road, it needs to stop and observe. It is very likely that the result calculated by these algorithms is that if the pedestrian has not reached the zebra crossing, the car will drive directly over it, which may cause a car accident. In this case, it is not as effective and simple as handwriting a rule. For example, if a car encounters a pedestrian waiting to cross the road, it will stop and wait until the person crosses the road before passing. Remember the cat recognition example we mentioned earlier, a colorful cat. In what situation would you best think of it as a cat rather than a painting? That's when you meet this colorful chip while driving on the road. If each neural network is separate, then you need to train the network one by one. The result of identifying a colored cat that's a real cat may be considered a low probability thing, but if it is end-to-end, it may be considered as high probability. Then you may need to stop while driving and let the cat go first. This method can indeed solve the problem of errors in the visual system's recognition of static objects. The statement in the previous video that LiDAR is superior to visual solutions should be wrong. You can watch the video clip now, which is from the YouTube channel Dirty Tesla. You can see that FSD identified the boxes on the road. Isn't he awesome? However, the biggest problem with autonomous driving is that it requires a large amount of data. There are many autonomous driving companies in China, but why do they need to test autonomous driving on cities one by one? This is because the traffic signs, road designs, and even the lines on the ground are different in many cities in China. I don't know if any of the viewers have ever traveled by car in China. For example, if you go to Xi'an, the position of the traffic lights outside the ancient wall is different from the general design of other cities. If you turn right without paying attention, you will probably violate the traffic rules. There are relatively few such situations in the United States. Secondly, the collection of traffic scenes encounter, such as queuing and learn. If there is no such scene, it is very likely that machine learning will not learn it, and the car will directly hit the front car. But according to my understanding, Tesla has actually some solutions for these problems. It's also not necessary to collect a huge amount of these scenes. The first one is automatic labeling, because manual labeling is actually very slow. based on our previous experience in algorithm development if there was no trained model in the early stage. Labeling thousands of pictures might take a month. Tesla trained the model by himself, then used the model to label these objects first, and then manually remove the wrong ones and re-labeled them, then retrained the model. After repeating this step, basically there is no need for too much manual labor, so the amount of data will be increased with faster automatic labeling. As long as there are enough cars collecting data, the number of images data will be far enough. Now I guess you know what I meant in our previous video, that early adopters is paying Tesla to experiment. Before the algorithm matured, people who bought FSD were indeed sponsoring Tesla's experiments. The second is how to collect enough scenario of real cases for training. As we said before, after the three-dimensional scene of real world is constructed, the route planning needs to be made. Assuming that the collection of rare cases is very small, what can be done to improve for planning benchmark this kind of scenario? The answer is that Tesla generates this scenario through a three-dimensional model and then throws it into the model for training. Tesla can also avoid the problem of collecting wrong information on some road. After all, a car passing by at an angle may only see part of the information, and this information may be biased. Dojo, a supercomputer, is used to aggregate the image analysis data of all vehicles to determine whether the construction of the road model is correct, so that the reconstructed road information is complete. In fact, we still have a lot of things about FSD that we haven't introduced, such as how to rebuild lanes. If we continue to talk about it, it will become an introduction video of FSD. Okay, after talking so much about FSD, I guess you think it is very powerful. However, I actually still maintain the point of view in the previous video. That is to say, Tesla's own EV sales growth may be weak because of insufficient charging infrastructure in Europe and the United States, and the FSD may face strong competition in China. In other countries, FSD faces regulatory issues. Car companies in China are launching their autonomous driving technologies, and some of them have reached a level close to FSD. If Tesla needs to implement FSD in China, it needs to wait for the approval of the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology of China and build its data collection server locally. It may take a long time. Tesla could miss out. In terms of the number of charging stations, Tesla's sales of FSD in China is theoretically fastest among countries because people who have tried FSD that tend to buy electric cars are most likely to be Chinese users. In Europe and the United States, I actually don't know if Tesla will be sued by users if FSD hits someone. Of course, as mentioned in our previous video, if the accident rate is very low, such as 0.0001%, Tesla can buy its own insurance to cover this part of users' losses, thereby increasing the FSD coverage rate, because it would actually be less risky than human drivers. In fact, we haven't shown you the failed parts of the new version of the FSD yet, such as the following videos. For example, the recognition of teddy bears failed. In the later scene, FSD almost hit the railing. So back to Tesla's valuation. How much revenue will this bring to Tesla? First of all, Tesla Model 3 and have sold a total of about 4.3 million vehicles after 2020. Tesla's HW 3.0 was launched in 2020. Currently, only cars have hardware above HW 3.0 can use FSD V12. We calculate based on the FSD price of US $920 per month, assuming that FSD purchases are all subscriptions and the subscription rate is 50%. Assuming that 1.8 million vehicles are sold in 2024 and a total of 6.1 million vehicles can activate FSD, Tesla's revenue can increase by $3.6 billion throughout the year. If you exclude the nearly 10% of subscribers previously estimated that have already subscribed, the actual increase in revenue will be about $0.2 billion. Here we have already considered the factor of price reduction. According to the financial report, the revenue of electric vehicles in 2023 was $82.419 billion. If we assume that the revenue from electric vehicles remains unchanged in 2024, then the revenue from electric vehicles in 2024 will be approximately $84.619 billion. Then the gross profit will be approximately 22%. This calculation is relatively static and does not take into account the impact of Tesla's electric vehicle price cuts, and the FSD prices are considered the same in all countries and regions. It is for rough reference. Then Tesla's stock price should probably rise. However, the price reduction of Tesla's cars is more than $1,200, which is more than the cost for 1-year FSD subscription. But there is a question of belief here. That is, how many people who buy Tesla will subscribe to FSD? And after the large-scale application of FSD, will there be any accidents that will reverse the reputation of FSD? Because relatively few Chinese electric vehicles exported overseas, and BYD, which goes overseas more than other Chinese companies, has weak autonomous driving technology. From this point of view, Tesla's share of autonomous driving in markets outside China should be very high. From this perspective, this may increase Tesla's sales, because this is something that no one else has, only Tesla has it. There are nearly zero competitors outside China. Assuming this is true, Tesla's car sales will also increase this year, but they may not be as high as before. Judging from current trends, the sales volume of hybrid models in the United States is better than that of pure electric vehicle. However, if this technology is used on robotaxi, and robotaxi can obtain regulatory approval, then the world will change. You can imagine a fully autonomous planned car, which is completely different from our current transportation market. What's the final outcome? We'll see. If you like our video, please click the subscribe button. Thank you.